Alright, so this is the script that I have here. It's made in a YAML file using Ansible. So up here I have a bunch of nodes for myself and for anybody else because I do plan on implementing this where I work. Um, just basic things that need to be set up on each device, so way the script can connect to it, as well as the different Ansible collections, which is basically like the equivalent of Python modules that you need to run the script, um, how you need to have the Ansible config file set up, so it's referencing the bulk file password, the inventory file, which the inventory file is basically just a file that you contains all of your host IP addresses and information about how to connect to these hosts. And usually those are split up into groups. So mine's encrypted because I don't want people seeing the passwords and stuff, because that's just not a good idea. But let's see here. I can pull up an example of what one might look like. So this is pretty close to what it looks like. Oh, this is even better. This is exactly what mine kind of looks like, roughly. So you can see in here it's split up into groups. This is an example of a file. So this is the group of CSR routers, and then you'll have your host name, and then the Ansible host is you want to set that to the IP address that you want to reach out to. And there's other information that you can specify usually as well, such as, let's see, here we go, such as what port you want it to connect on, timeout periods, what kind of connection you want to make. In our case, it's going to be using SSH and netconf, which is just basically a fancy SSH. So now that I've shown you that, and you understand that, and then GitHub notes. So this is how you can make sure that the script is backing up to your GitHub of choice. So the first part of the script here, really simple. It's using the localhost group, which is whatever you're running on. In my case, it's this Ubuntu server. And it's just getting the date and time from your machine, storing that as a fact, which is an Ansible, the equivalent of storing something as a variable. Then it's going to create an archive directory and a current directory to store backups in. And this is kind of important because archive is going to make it easy to search through by date and time to see previous backups, and current is always going to be a snapshot of the most up-to-date backup. And that's important because when these configs do get backed up to GitHub, you can't see the differences in config commits unless um, unless the file names and everything stays the same, which is why we have this current directory, because the date and time is never going to be the same. It's always going to be a different year or time or whatever, and that's just to keep track of previous ones. But current, you can look at the config history, commit history of current to see all the differences in configs and time periods and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So then we can move on to the Cisco routers group here. So I have gathering facts turned off. I think I also did that for localhost, yes, which is basically just something that Ansible automatically runs to connect the basic config data of the device. I'm just saving the time because I don't need that, so I'm turning that off to make the script a little faster. So I gave it this portion of the script a little name. The groups can be like split up into like tasks. So this is a task itself here. It's backing up to config, and it's using this module here to run the command on the device show run, and then registering that to a variable called config. And then we have another task that's taking the output of config and saving that to a text file, config.txt, at this location, which is going to be the archive location, and then it does the same thing for current, using, again, the date and time, inventory host name. Then if you go down here, this is running a different portion, which is basically just running a list of commands to get kind of a snapshot of how the device is set up and currently configured and working at the time that this is being backed up. So, you can see the version, which, basically it's going to show you stuff that you can't see in the config. So like the version of the device, CDP neighbors, and LLDP neighbors, so what kind of devices are connected to it at this period of time. Boot information, how's it set up to boot, make sure it's not being set up to boot to Ramon or something like. Uh, Show clock, make sure that the clocks look, if you want to see if the clock is set correctly, you can compare that with the time that it was backed up. Interfaces and show the ARP table and everything like that. And then it's taking that list of commands, registering it to a variable, and then it runs the variable through this template that I made in this thing called Jira. And basically what that does is it organizes the output. So it's going to put the command in the command list in here, and then it's going to put these hashes around it. So it basically just separates the output because it's combining all of those command outputs into one text file. So that's just gonna, add a little header, a little organization, as one might say. And you can see it's saving that to current and the archive directory as well. Then we have it going here for the Cisco switches. It's quite literally doing the same thing. So I just had this split up into two different areas because there's a couple more commands that you can check on and run on Cisco switches that you can't do on routers. So, yep, same thing. Then Juniper gets a little bit different. It's making the connection via netconf, which is just a fancier SSH basically. It's setting the current and archive directories as variables, and then it's going through and doing the tasks. So first, to make sure that the directories actually exist, because I had a few errors where it couldn't find them for some reason, so I had to go through and basically tell a variable where they were. Don't know why I had to do that, but I did. And then we basically run the show configuration using the Juniper Networks Junos command module, registering that to an output, and basically doing the same thing here. And we're doing the same thing, netconf, and then we're running a list of commands to basically get a snapshot of what that device looks like at that period of time. Now, one interesting thing about when you're running commands on a Juniper device is, unlike Cisco straight up just takes and registers the output, how you see it on the device. In Juniper, when you're running this, it takes it all in XML data, which is kind of ugly to look at, and maybe I can point that out when I run it. Um, but it's kind of ugly to look at, so I have that run through a Jira template. First, it obviously detects and saves it to a variable and telling it that's going to be XML. Then it runs it through my Jira template here, which was a little bit more complex. Not too much really going on here that was too difficult. But basically, it defaults to sending the output to something called result.xml. It's checking to make sure that there's something actually in there. If length is greater than 0, if length is equal to 0, well then there must be nothing in there, so it tells you it fails. So some error, some error correction I have in there to catch errors. So yeah, then if length is greater than 0, then it's going to replace anywhere that the brackets are meeting with a bracket, and then this, I forget what we called those in class. I think it's escape characters. This escape character, the \n does a new line, and then it's going to indent it by 4, and that just makes it look a little bit more clean when you're looking through the output there. a little bit more readable. Then we have the GitHub backup portion here, which is basically taking all of the taking the folders of the archive and the current that are made, and taking all the backups, configs, and all the text files in there, and basically staging the backups by using the backups folder, like I just said, and then it's going to commit that folder to the GitHub that you have it set up to, which the notes to do that are at the top. And then it's going to basically just leave this -m just sets the message for the backup, so you can kind of look on GitHub and see this message. And it's just saying backup with the date and time, so you can see when that was happening. I did have some errors, so I had to put this ignore errors thing, because if you run this and for whatever reason there aren't any changes to any of the configs or any of the text files, it kind of doesn't work, obviously, because there's nothing to commit. So this basically just ignores that and pushes anyways. And then basically it will first do a git pull and pull down what it has, and then push to make sure that there are no errors with that. Before we run the script, just a quick overview of how these network devices are being hosted. They're being hosted in something called EvenG. There's basically just a fancier packet tracer. You guys are familiar with that from last year. But instead of emulating the devices, it's actual real images of the devices, so there's no limitations to what you can do on them, because you can't test Ansible scripts in Cisco Packet Tracer because they don't have that enabled. But basically what's going on here, these are all devices you can log into and configure any which way you want. They are all in their various subnets. These are the Juniper devices here, the Juniper switch, Juniper router, Cisco router, and the Cisco switch, which all get routed back to my management network, which is where the Ansible server is hosted on Ubuntu. Come in here and run the script. So as you can see, it kind of gives you a play recap here at the end. So you can see there were 3 things that changed on the localhost side, 2 things changed on the other sides of things. I'm guessing that would probably be some of the show commands, as those change quite frequently from your ARP table and your MAC address table. Clear out information every 5 minutes, so there might be some different things there. So yeah, change is fine. It also will tell you if it fails to connect for whatever reason. But yeah, this works. So if we look now and we cd to directory that we save those in. So if we look in Ansible, no, it's network programmability. So if we look in network programmability, and then we hit ls, we can see the backups folder here. You cd into that. We see the 2 directories I was talking about at the very beginning here, the archive and the current. So if you cd into the current, that's going to show you what we just backed up. So these are all of the most recent configuration files. So if we just, let's less one of these here. So if we look at the Cisco switch config, you can go through here and see the entire config. You can scroll through it, copy it, whatever you want to do with it. And you can use Juniper and Cisco support copying via FTP. So you can set up an FTP server on the Ubuntu server as well, and then just copy the configs from the Ubuntu server onto your device, or you could go in here and just copy it. But that's all that data. I can show you how the templates look as well. So we had templates for the Cisco show output, which was just a simple header. So you can see for each command it has a little header here that got put in, so you can look through the information better. And then for that ugly XML data that we have, it's formatted and doesn't look as blocky. We don't like blocky. So you can see the RPC command that's running nicely formatted, and then the indentation that we had put in as well, so way it doesn't look blocky. So now, I guess I should also show you the archive folder as well. So this is if you want to go back in time and look at previous archives, you have folders I created with the date. So you can CD into one of those. So let's look at, I don't know, let's look at whatever one's back in April there. And you can see you have all the config information there. And you can open, you know, any of these up, and it'll do its thing. And each config, you'll see in the config output here, you can see that it actually includes the day and time, or just the date as well. So you have that just to know where you're at. So now if we look here, let's just go to the top of that for some reason. So now if we go into the GitHub page that I have, we can refresh here. And we can see it was committed to 4 minutes ago. And if we look into the backups folder, you can look at the current, and this is going to mimic exactly what you have on your device. Now you may be wondering, why would I want this to back up to GitHub? Well, one reason is for redundancy. If something goes wrong with your local host or your Ubuntu server where you're storing all these configs, and you have another location where your backups are set up to, so you can not lose those and still operate well. And the other reason I did it is because Git has an amazing way of version control, so you can see the differences in config as they're being backed up. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if we click on the commit that we made 4 minutes ago, you can actually see what has changed. So you can see all the information that has changed since the last time you backed up. So if I made a change in one of these configs, you can see what changed, and it'll tell you what time the config changed and all of that good stuff. That's pretty much my project. I hope you guys enjoyed.